everybody. This is Francesca Scotis. I'm the internship coordinator in the Career Development Office, and I am here today to introduce our Life After Woo video that is focused on interviewing. So this is a conversation with an alumni named Teneah Rushen, who was a CCM major and is now a recruiter for the Abercrombie and Fitch and Hollister company. And through the nature of Teneah's job, Teneah has conducted hundreds of interviews and has so much information on how to have a successful interview, how to interact with recruiters, and how to incorporate your experiences at Willamette in the interview process. And so this is a pre-recorded video. It's a conversation that was facilitated by our assistant director of career education, Ann Lepore. So you won't see me for the rest of the video. I'm just here to let you all know that there was some technical difficulties with the recording at the beginning, which required us to cut about the first 3 or 4 minutes. And so it's going to look like you're entering the video mid-conversation. But really all that got cut was Teneah's introduction, which I have now covered for you. And with that, I will now be passing the mic on to the rest of the video, which we hope that you enjoy.
Can you tell me a little bit, or tell us all a little bit about, just on a base level, how do you know, like, when somebody, like, you want to talk to somebody when they're prepared? What are some of the key things that you look for in an interview?
Yeah, so there are quite a few things. I have a few written down, so I'll just kind of talk about those. But I watched the video that Francesca provided, and I would say it's pretty spot on. The first thing that you want to know when you're getting to an interview or you're speaking with a recruiter is research the company. I cannot express that more than enough. And research the position you're applying for. So recruiters are going to casually ask you questions like, well, what do you know about our company? Why did you apply for this role? What do you know about the position? This question is actually very serious because they want to know if you're invested and if you're researching and doing your homework. The more specific, the better. A lot of companies, when you graduate from college, they have the same type of entry-level position regardless of your field. So they want to know why us. Recruiters, they have quotas they need to meet. So they're going to consider a candidate more if that person's really invested into the company. You don't need to know everything about the company, but some of the worst answers I've heard has just been like, oh, I know it's a clothing store. So like, well, yes, we all know that, but what else do you know about the company? So I kind of wrote a little example also of the way I would answer this question. So if someone asks you, why do you want to apply to this role, or why do you want to work with us? Something I would say is, I applied for the manager and training position at Abercrombie and Fitch because I am passionate about fashion and developing my career in management. I want to work with a company that promotes diversity, equity, and inclusion and sustainable practices. I was extremely excited to learn that Abercrombie has donated over $250,000 to the STEA Fund, $200,000 to the Trevor Project, and launched a 13-year, 100% renewable energy supply agreement for their corporate headquarters. I believe that with my communication and media degree, my 5 years of retail and leadership experience, and my passion for creating an inclusive environment, Abercrombie is the right place for me. So just with a quick little Google search of the company's website, I found all this information on there. I was able to see the initiatives, the organizations that the company has been working with, but I also relisted the job title, a few characteristics that the job description has, and then ended with how my skills and relevant experience would make it a right fit. So researching the company is more than just about what is it? It's like, what does the company believe in? What is the culture about? And these are things that are accessible. So reading the mission statement is a great first step, but that's something recruiters are going to ask you casually, but that's like really a big component for the initial conversation.
That's really helpful. Do you have any tips on how to make it feel, can you kind of tell the difference if that's an authentic, when somebody's being authentic in their responses, or if it feels like they're just kind of reciting something? Like, how do you feel like you can kind of tell, like, okay, this person is serious about this?
It's usually, you can also tell by how they answer their other questions throughout the interview, which I'll talk about a little more down there. But it's also, when you're researching the company, staying organized. So if you're applying to like hundreds of jobs, like have a Excel, OneNote, have their like mission statement in there, but make it personal. Like if it's something you really care about diversity and equity and inclusion, like be passionate about that with your tone as the communication major in me. Show it with your body language, if your eyes brightening up. I think there's a big difference between someone just finding the first thing on the mission statement, and then someone who's able to tie it back into their degree, what they've done previously, what they want to see moving forward, and like, let's say my example, developing others, creating an inclusive environment, and with the examples that you provide, tying that back all together. So it's kind of like writing an essay. You're writing an essay about yourself, and you're trying to persuade the recruiter that you're the person for the job, essentially.
Yeah, that's so interesting. We talk about that a lot with resumes and cover letters, and how, like, you should be providing sort of almost like supporting evidence. It's like kind of, and so it sounds like from, in an interview, it's the same kind of thing, except you're talking it and you have to like kind of back things up a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. And recruiters, they know people get nervous. They know if it's someone's first job. So there's the nerves, the little nerves, or the stumbling on a few words in the beginning isn't something that's not going to make you successful. So overall impact of your interview, the questions you're asking. So I know we talked a lot about what questions do you ask a recruiter. There's so many to ask. It depends on what stage of the interview process you're in. So most of the time, recruiters are the first people you're going to meet. They may not be skilled in the department that you're applying for. For example, a lot of technical recruiters don't really know anything about coding. They don't need to. So it's really about your initial impact on the recruiter, how you're presenting yourself, how you're speaking to things. They may have like key words that they need to look for, but some questions I really enjoy being asked is, what has my experience been with the company? What is my favorite part about my job? What would the candidates day-to-day look like? How does the company develop associates associates? And then how long has the position been available, and how quickly are you trying to fill it? I think from a candidate perspective, the last question is really important, because it could be a red flag that you're seeing the same position in the same area open over and over and over again, because then there's a reason why it's open. So those are, I know when you are graduating, you're starting to look for jobs, you kind of start applying to everything, but you still want to be careful and, ask the recruiter, what was your experience like? Is this someplace that I want to grow and develop in, and getting their take on it? And it's also going to show that you're engaged in the company, you're engaged with the recruiter, you genuinely want to know about their experience, and it'll give you a firsthand account for that as well.
Cool. Okay, let's see. I'm just going to look really quick at our other questions here. Was there anything else? Do you want to tell me a little bit about anything that is sort of for you like that's kind of an automatic, maybe negative? It sounds like things like being nervous isn't necessarily a big problem. What are some things that maybe are?
Yeah, so when I was also listening to the video, there's some things I jotted down that I wanted to touch on also a little more. So the question about, tell me about yourself. So this is another one of those questions. It's going to be at the beginning. It could be at a phone screening, not even at the interview stage. This one's really important. I like to say they kind of set people up for this. So I thought it was beautifully prepared and explained on the video. Something I would just add to that is, let's see here. Speak about your relevant experience, your degree, and a unique and fun fact about yourself. Recruiters sometimes interview 100 people in a week or in 2 weeks. They interview a lot of people. They're engaging with a lot of people. So what's something about you that is special that they'll remember? For me, when I was interviewing, I always talk about how I was a speed skater. I didn't know any other speed skaters in Oregon or anything like that. And that's something that clicked. That actually is what got me, well, one of the things that got me into Willamette, and they added that into my mission. So it's something that ties them back to it. Another thing you really want to be careful about is talking about where you want to be. And so this is where I see a lot of red flags. You want to think about the relevancy of the position. So let's say you are applying for a finance job and you say 2 years down the line, I want to be head of a marketing agency. Well, that doesn't really match well with finance. That could be your dream, but that maybe you shouldn't tell a recruiter that, because instantly now in the recruiter's eyes, you're not here for the long run. You're not invested in the company. So it's okay to not know where your path is. But I would just, when you're answering these questions to a recruiter, say you are applying for a marketing job and your goal is to continue with marketing. Yes, say that. You want to grow and develop with the company, but you want to make sure that you're just tailoring your answers So you are showing that you are invested to the company, and that's what your goal is. It just goes back to the relevancy of the position you're applying for. The same as sometimes when recruiters hear about grad school. Some jobs, yes, like we want that higher education. For some jobs, it's also can be a red flag to the hiring manager because it just says, well, they're going to only be here for a couple of years and then they're going to go to graduate school. So until the entire culture around it changes, it's usually if you're not sure where you want to end up, I would say something that's relevant to the job, because at the end of the day, you can still do what you want to do in life. But from a recruiter perspective, in their eyes, it might be like, well, this person won't want to stay with us. And then they might choose another candidate over that. So it's just being very strategic with how you're answering where you see yourself in the next few years, because that's another semi-trick question from recruiters.
So how would you recommend, like, say somebody is like thinking, okay, I want to come and get some management experience for a couple of years, and they're thinking that maybe they'll go back and get an MBA or something like that. But first they just want to get some like hands-on work experience. How would you recommend answering that question?
And honestly, I wouldn't mention it.
Just don't mention it. Okay.
I just wouldn't, because something that I talk about also with hiring managers is, say you have an awesome candidate, they say they want to spend their whole life at your company and then they leave within a month. So you just don't know. But for the initial hiring process, I think it's just easier to say, I'm looking to build management experience and learn and grow with this company. I know you guys have great internal opportunities, but if you do have a passion for graduate school down the line, it's not something your recruiter needs to know.
Yeah.
And then
Well, and I mean, and it's not necessarily untruthful to say that you're looking to gain management experience and that's where you want to grow. So, okay, that's helpful. Because I get that question a lot from students. So okay.
And it really, once again, depends on the job you're looking at. If the company really promotes, like, we pay for the higher education, all those things, then talk about it. It just goes back to researching your company and just like what their culture is as well. Another thing that I thought I was so happy to see was the STAR method with answering. That is literally in our interview packets, how we rank answers. So just to reiterate, just speaking to a specific situation, what was it? If you don't have the work experience, use school, that's totally fine. What was the task? The most important is the action and the result. That's what recruiters want to hear about. What did you do specifically that made a change, and what was the result? If you have data to back that up, use it. So whether it's a group project and you increased your score from a 76 to 85, what steps did you take to get there, and say that score? It just makes it more believable to a recruiter. And then something I wanted to add on is also just once you're done explaining it, just tie your answer up with what you've learned from that experience and how it can translate to the professional world. So what transferable skill did you learn from that example you gave that can help you throughout your career? This is just important because it goes back to relevancy. And why was that example important? Like, why did you, out of all the things you could have said, why is it important to tell me that? So tying back the big picture, the less probing a recruiter has to do, the better. You want the interview process to feel more like a conversation anyway. So if I have to say, well, tell me a little more. Well, tell me a little more. What did you learn from that? So, because right now you just kind of told me a situation that happened, but what was the overall message there? So that's something a recruiter is also looking for as well.
Cool.
Yeah, so cool. So I know a lot of people have Zoom interviews, so I was going to talk a little bit about how to best prepare for those as well, if we have time for that.
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay, cool. So for me, I do about 95% of my interviews via Zoom. So I've learned quite a bit. I've never used it before quarantine, so I had to learn it as well. But some pretty simple tips to use with Zoom, but it's also tips that you can use for in-person. But the first thing is, please test your equipment the day before and a few hours before, and make sure your internet connection is good and that your sound is working. By now, like I said, recruiters are understanding, but by now they probably expect most people to understand that type of technology. So saying like, oh, I didn't know how to use it, it's not really going to fly well. You can make practice Zoom meetings, just practice it beforehand and test your equipment. My senior year, I was practicing a virtual interview and I didn't know how to do it and I didn't pass. So I was like, I'm never going to have to use this. And then look at us now. So definitely test your equipment. Make sure you're in an appropriate location where there aren't a ton of background noise or people walking around. You can see my background's blurred, but that can just cause some distraction. Make sure that you don't arrive super early to a virtual interview. I honestly suggest 5 minutes before, 10 most, but most times recruiters or hiring managers, they have their day packed. So they're not even going to hop on until that moment or a few minutes after. If it's an in-person interview, that's different. I would say at least 15 minutes before, but it can be uncomfortable to see because we can see if someone's already waiting in the waiting room. And then it's just a little uncomfortable because if someone's logging on 30 minutes before, you feel bad that they're waiting, but you also have other obligations before that time. So you don't need to be extremely early, just making sure you can make sure your equipment's set up, but don't be late either. Another thing that a lot of people don't realize is your angling of the camera. So you want to be professional with that as well. I've had a few interviews where candidates were using their phone, which is fine, but it was like a down up angle where I was just kind of seeing like their ceiling, like up their nose, anything like that. Like I said, a professional angle is where, usually your chest to the head, camera's pretty still. That's something I've seen a lot. So try to also keep your eyes focused on the camera, moving around, looking around, that can be distracting. And then I've also had some interesting body movements. I think people are nervous. They don't necessarily know what to do on the camera. So I'm notorious for the restless leg syndrome, but just being aware of your body language to that, it's a little more difficult to already read someone through the camera. So you just want to make sure that you're still remaining professional and keeping it a casual conversation. So yeah, recruiters are very understanding during the pandemic, but it just goes back to remaining professional, testing your technology, asking questions, and then keeping yourself focused. So I would say those are the best tips for Zoom, but I can answer any other questions that people have there. I also would say the biggest difference between virtual and in-person interviews has just been that candidates treat virtual less professionally, which you don't necessarily want to do. And that's through joining late, angles, backgrounds, sound not working, but even a less professional tone, which yes, you could be in someone's room and you're talking to them, but remembering to stay professional because it's just as serious as an in-person interview would be. Yeah.
That's great. Those are great tips. I feel like a lot of what you're saying goes back to, the advice that we give for in-person interviews too, which is just that you always want the recruiter or the interviewer, whoever it is to be able to focus on your words and what you're saying. And so anything that distracts from that, can be problematic. And in a Zoom situation, I feel like it's almost a greater risk, right? Because I don't know, it's just not in person. So yeah, anyway, that's helpful.
They can't see you in person. They can't judge other things. What they're judging is what they see here and how you're behaving and how you're speaking. So really focusing on that as well. I know I saw some stuff about thank you letters. I think they're great. I rarely get them. They're not common, and I think recruiters love them as well. I agree with the 24-hour time frame. I wouldn't do it the day of the interview just because a recruiter could have a lot more interview stuff going on, but seeing that pop in like the next morning is exciting. I would just make sure to reiterate the position you applied for, why you like the company, and most importantly, a few takeaways from the interview that you had. What did the recruiter give you that you liked? Compliment them. Were they excited about the position? Did they give you great information? Anything like that, give them a compliment as well. And what you learned that was valuable during that time. So they don't need to be too long, too hectic. I'm just like, thank you. I'm really interested in the manager and training position. I really learned a lot. I loved how you spoke about your experience and give specific examples. So your promotion history or how you were able to do this and that, but like it goes back to more specifics, the better. And it just shows that recruiter that you're listening, you're interested, and you appreciate their time. Because interviews can go from 30 minutes to an hour and a half, and that's an hour and a half that they could have focused on, maybe another candidate or something like that. So I think they're a great tool. I don't think they're utilized enough. So I definitely recommend them there.
Great.
Yeah. And then I know also just how to connect with the recruiter. That was something in college what had no idea how to do. I barely use LinkedIn, but LinkedIn is your friend there. That's recruiters are on it 24/7, even when they're off the clock. The best way to find one is figure out what company you want to work for. You can search the company and then you can actually refine your search for keywords. I would just put in recruiter. All major recruiters are going to have that in their bio and it should pop up. When you're connecting with a recruiter, make sure you do it during business hours. I would say that's just professional because they'll get the notification to their email that this person wants to connect with you. Unless you're maybe applying like internationally in time zone, but usually during a business timeframe is best, especially because I suggest you add a comment to your invite. That's just gonna make you stand out even more. People connect with people all the time, but adding a comment, they're gonna see that. So an example of a good comment, I would say, if someone's messaging me, "Hi, Teneah, I'm a senior at Sacramento State and I'm getting my degree in fashion merchandising. I saw that you were the Northern California recruiter for Abercrombie and Fitch, and I'm really interested in the MIT position. I would love to connect and learn more about open positions in the Sacramento area." So already you're doing more than another candidate who's just connecting. You're putting yourself out there, you're being professional, you're being nice, you're showing that you've looked at their profile. Okay, they're a recruiter in this area. And then you also saw maybe that they had open positions and then you reached out to them. Not every recruiter they might not respond and they might not be able to help you, but that's when you can kindly ask them to refer you to the right person and they'll be more than happy to do that because that's what our job entails. But I emphasize on the business hours because I get a lot of messages from people like that act like it's social media DMs. It's not just like, hey, I want a job. I want a job. It's like, keep it professional, like you would message a professor. So yeah, that would be my advice there.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's super helpful. That's another question we get a lot is sort of like how to go about that on LinkedIn and that kind of thing. So yeah, that's definitely helpful.
Yeah. And then I guess lastly, the other advice I have for people to remember is just recruiters aren't hiring managers. I've hired a few people, but at the end of the day, it's the hiring manager's decision. But with that being said, the recruiter is the first person you're going to see. So they're going to have a lot of influence. They might not be the one who says yes, that person, but they're going to inform the hiring manager of how you interacted with communication, how you presented yourself during an interview, how you presented after an interview. So from start to finish, you want to remain professional, remain composed. And then usually good things happen. So if it's between two people of the same skill set, the recruiter might say, well, this person sent me a thank you email. This person had great communication. So this person, I think, would be a better leader because they have X, Y, and Z skills. So I would say that's definitely, something to remember as well.
Cool.
Yeah.
This is so helpful. I mean, it reiterates a lot of what the advice that we give, but I feel like it just gives it a whole nother context, which is just really, I think at least it's helpful for me for sure to hear some of that. With that said, I would, not to put pressure on the two of you that are here attending here, but I wanted to check in with you and see if you had any questions or anything that you wanted to ask.
I was wondering about negotiations and I guess if they ask the salary question, how do you navigate that? How do you know how much leverage you have or don't have?
That's a good question. It really depends on the company and the hiring manager. So for example, I have a hiring manager that does not allow me to tell the salary to candidates, where I have another one who does. So a few things that recruiters will do, they might ask you what your range is. I would research the position, research what is average around that time. And I would do, a semi-high, like probably, let's say the average salary is like $70,000. I would say your range should be $70,000 to like $80,000. That way you're still within the average range, but then you have room for negotiation with the other as well. I would also, it's tricky also asking a recruiter because most of the time they'll say that's something that will be discussed in the next interview as well. So I would say the best advice there is give like a higher range to the recruiter if they ask. but negotiations come from the HR and associate relations level as well. So there's not much a recruiter can do except for once you get an offer, if you negotiate back and forth, have the influence there. So like I said, the recruiter may know the starting salary, but are they the ones who are going to say you're going to get a hire? No, it's going to be HR. Does that make sense? So it's tricky, definitely.
Yeah,
like,
that's helpful. Thank you.
yeah, and it sounds like basically, you know, do your homework again, you know, doing that research in advance.
Yeah,
Great.
and companies, I'm always told, and you know, women are also less likely to ask for more money. It's just the studies show that. Be clear up front with your expectations too. Recruiters don't want their time wasted, but you also don't want your time wasted if it's not within your budget. So if they don't ask, you're in a second interview to say that this is the salary I'm looking for based off my market research for a entry-level position with this much experience. This is what I'm looking for. And it's also okay to ask for more. The worst they're going to say is no. But so yeah, that was something I had to learn too. I was very scared to talk about pay as well.
Yeah, I feel like it's one of those things that we're just conditioned to, like, we don't talk about that, but then it's like you have to, because you have to advocate for yourself. And yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, any other questions?
I'm gonna answer them all. And if you guys have questions later on, you guys can add me on LinkedIn. Just Teneah. It's a very easy, I don't think many other Teneahs would pop up. My face is on there. I'm here to help. I wish I had, you know, a lot of the support when I was in college. Job search is crazy. We're going into a different, I feel like, market now. So it's going to be more competitive, but just continue doing your homework and fighting for yourself. Explain to people in your elevator pitch in 1 minute, why are you the candidate? That's the time to be excited about all your accomplishments, everything you've done, and then just think about the relevancy of the position. You might be amazing at juggling, but maybe not use that for all of your examples, but that would be a great fun fact about yourself. So just relevancy, do your research, and then fight for yourself, and then just remain professional. Be outgoing, engage, ask questions, and just be respectful at the same time. So it's a lot of skills that Willamette teaches you, which is awesome. And it's just really using that and putting it into effect also.
That reminds me, Teneah, of just one other question I had, which is, to what extent do you pay attention to people's major? Like if you have a business major looking for a management role, and then you have a psychology major looking for a management role, do you care? Or is it more about the way that they market themselves? Like, sort of, yeah, if you could speak to that a little bit, because I know we have a lot of liberal arts majors that are potentially looking in areas that aren't their major. So
yeah, definitely. In the Bay Area, I get a lot of tech resumes. So at first I was like, why would they want to be in management and fashion? I don't care really much about the major. Hiring managers a little more, because they get skeptical of, why would you make this your degree and spend 4 years on it if this is not where you want to be? I think the best case is when you're doing your resume, it's a lot of work, but you usually want to tailor it for whatever job you're applying to. So let's say you have a computer science degree. When you're talking about your experience, I would try to make it as relevant as possible to something in management. So let's say you worked on a project with 5 other coders, talk about that. Like, what did you learn from your project? To where were you the delegator? Were you the leader of that? So tailoring it that way. When you get to your interview, you can say, yeah, I am a computer science major. However, these are the skills I learned working in group projects or speaking in front of or presenting my code. So it's just, once again, the relevancy, psychology. I learned behavior. I know how to manage people. So tying it back to there. So degree doesn't necessarily matter. It's just how you speak to it and making it relevant to the position that you're applying for. Because a lot of times jobs just want the degree because you learn a lot of transferable skills in the degree, and it also just shows commitment also. So.
okay, thank you. That's helpful. Any other questions?
Make sure I'm not forgetting anything for you guys.
Yeah, take a look real quick if you want.
I had one last question. Do you have advice on following up after the interview without being pushy or annoying?
Yes. So unfortunately, a lot of recruiters at companies will not respond to everyone. So I would send the thank you email within 24 hours. Most recruiters will give you a response if they want to move forward within a week to a week and a half. If that week and a half hasn't come, that's when I would reach out with an email. Just say, hi, Teneah. I wanted to thank you again for the opportunity to interview with your company. I just wanted to follow up on our interview process. I'm sure you've had a busy week. You still don't get a response, which unfortunately it happens. I've seen it before. Any other questions for me?
Sorry, Teneah, can I bug you? My things froze on my end, and I just want to, since it's recording onto my computer, I just want to make sure that I get that last really good answer. So you were saying if so I heard the part about checking back in and just wanted to check on your interview process, and then I missed the like second little half of that. So
oh, so basically, yeah. So send your, I'll just kind of say it. Send your thank you email the next day, just relevant. If you haven't heard anything in a week and a half to 2 weeks, I would send a follow-up email.
Yeah.
If you still don't hear anything, it's most likely they moved on with another candidate, and they just won't respond. And that will kind of be your gauger there. But yeah, I see it all the time on LinkedIn, people frustrated that recruiters aren't responding. So that's something that we need.
sorry, I am
Frozen.
Yeah, sorry. This is so
Okay.
sweet. Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you. Okay, did we have any other questions? This has been so great. I really, I just love hearing just from Willamette alums and hearing what people are doing and how successful you are. But I also it's really helpful for us as a career development office to know if the advice that we're giving is consistent with what people in the industry that are actually doing this work want to see. So it's really helpful. And you added some context that I think our students will really appreciate hearing. So
yeah, definitely. My boyfriend, he's a Willamette alumni too, and for his interview process, he's tech. He was told that he had like the best interviews also. So I mean, the skills that you learn at Willamette, definitely listen. They work. Willamette's more than just the degree, so you learn so many skills that will take you so many different places. And just going back to how can you be a professional, presentable person and fight for yourself too. So yeah, it's been great.